You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Cyberspace, the new frontier. These are the voyages of the podcast First Contact. Its mission? To explore every episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. To seek out new viewers and have new conversations. To boldly view what many have viewed before. Welcome to First Contact, the Next Generation introcast, where each week two veterans of Star Trek guide a newcomer through the adventures of the Enterprise D. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This week we are looking at Coming of Age. It was written by Sandy Fries and directed by Michael Vijar. It first aired the week of March 14th, 1988. James, tell me all about this episode.
Representatives from Starfleet Command come on board to conduct a thorough investigation into the activities of the Enterprise and its crew. It's about time. Meanwhile, Wesley beams down to Relva 7 to take the Starfleet Academy entrance exam, which sees him pitted against three other candidates in a bizarre and elaborate test. Ultimately, Wesley is beaten by what appears to be the least suitable candidate, and the investigation finds nothing wrong with the Enterprise. But is there something wrong deep in the heart of Starfleet?
So, first impressions of this episode. It's a Wesley episode, and we all love those.
Yeah, interesting one. I mean, with all these podcasts, I've had various people say to me, I love it on the podcast when you really hate an episode, when you get really angry about it. Those are the best episodes. So in many ways, this podcast should be the worst one of the series so far, because this is probably quite easily the best episode of Series 1 that there's been.
It is as if it has all come together at this point, and the writing is elevated. Last week's episode we were saying they've taken basically all the standard Starfleet elements and just plugged them in. This feels distinctly like an episode of Star Trek Next Generation, and it feels miles away from Star Trek. It does feel like they are writing in the late 20th century as opposed to the mid.
It does feel, for the first time, that Wesley is an actual character. You know, he's not Wesley Crusher, boy genius.
I mean, there is no question he is better written here than he has been at any other point. They aren't making him precocious. They aren't making his knowledge annoying. I mean, it should be. There's 4 what should be very annoying kids. And they aren't. It's fine. I'm invested in Wesley's story, which is a phrase that I never thought I'd say at the start of this run. And equally, the plot aboard the Enterprise has me gripped. There is some tension there. My God, we've been crying out for some tension through this series.
That element, I mean, we have in the past talked about how bland these characters are, and that's why it's exciting when someone like Q comes aboard, because he ruffles feathers. He actually gets them doing something. Similarly, Luxana Troy, it makes the crew react in a different way. In this case, Commander Remick is a perfect foil, a job's worth almost, and he does highlight some of the flaws that exist in these characters, and you know, they really need some flaws.
Well, and I thought also, at this point in the series, what a great point to look back at what we've already had and have a sort of an assessment, because, you know, you get the sense that a lot of the things that the Enterprise is experiencing are quite uncommon for Starfleet. Which is fine, you know, it makes for more interesting stories. But it equally makes an odd story point that there's never anything made of it, that Starfleet don't seem to care. Oh yeah, that shit, that always has those problems. Yeah. It just goes with the job, I suppose. But to have someone come in at this point, this many episodes in, and go, yeah, that story there where you had the virus aboard, that bit weird, isn't it? That all sounds a bit suspicious. That great idea. Absolutely brilliant. Playing with the show's previous stories. That's absolutely what it needed to do.
And we have all been saying that the crew so often act incompetently, so in some way to have them put on trial is a good thing. Obviously, nothing major comes of it, but it is a good way to use what has been a poor backstory to actually enhance this episode and enhance it going forward.
I mean, that is the worst that you could say of the episode, I think, is that plot sort of peters out at the end of the episode. It's obviously building to something, but for this episode, it sort of stops. But I enjoyed it enough that I didn't really care.
You know, you say that there are some incompetent people aboard the Enterprise, and there are. We keep seeing incompetent Starfleet officers, yet you've got 4 really smart candidates down on the planet trying to get into Starfleet, and they can only accept 1.
Yeah, how oversubscribed is Starfleet?
It's really weird. Does anyone think that this test seems a lot harder than it should be to get into Starfleet? I mean, presumably, every single one of these characters has done this test. Troy's done it, Yar's done it, Data's done it. Can you imagine their tests? Are they all physics experts? Do they have advanced expertise in everything? Are they both the physically and mentally best of the best?
I'm imagining that Tasha Yar's psych test involved rape gangs. I'm glad we didn't see that episode. Really glad.
Oh, that's a cute cat you've got there. What are we doing with that?
Oh dear. Oh no.
And I bet Geordie's psych test was he went into a room and then all the lights went out and he thought he was blind.
God, yeah, wouldn't that be terrible? That would change the makeup of the show, wouldn't it? So what would Data's have been?
Rust? In Star Trek 2009, Captain Pike just says to Kirk, enlist in Starfleet, and he jumps on board a shuttle and off he goes. Clearly, in the 100 years since then, it's got a little bit more difficult. It's not enlisting, because you're training to be an officer. You do actually have to pass a test, because you have to be competent on a number of levels. It's not just like signing up to be a private in the military. You don't get to go just from being in Starfleet to being captain of a ship. Oh. Do you not think it just seems a little bit too difficult? It's like some kind of weird futuristic game show, along with a strange, grinning, full-friendly host. I can't quite work out why it needs to be that hard to get into Starfleet.
Well, and also, why does Wesley have to take this test on Relva 7? Why is it essential that he has to do it there? Why? Because presumably, what it's set up as is they can only take one candidate from Relva 7. Does that mean he could have taken the test elsewhere and there would have been less candidates? Is it like a postcode lottery?
I mean, maybe it could have been that Wesley grew up on that planet with Beverly Crusher.
I thought it was just where the Enterprise happens to be passing and there was a Starfleet base that presumably is set up to do this fairly often. Because you would think for the psych tests in there, they've clearly hired actors to come in and perform in their little role-play exercises, and they've got the setup so they can destroy rooms or fake first aid situations. So they've obviously got that. Is that base just for Starfleet entry?
The thing that I love about that is that presumably everyone working on that base would have had to have gone through those tests. And imagine if you'd gone through all of those tests, the hard test, going through the psych test, having your mind played with, and then at the end of it, you get to be the man who pretends that his legs are broken. I'm so proud of my son.
It's like working at Disneyland on one of these rides where you've got to pretend there's a disaster happening.
Congratulations, you've passed your tests. Great! Does that mean I'm aboard a starship? No, you're going to be the man who hides behind a girder and goes, no, I can't, it's going to go me. No, I can't. Oh, I kind of wanted to be aboard the ship. Yeah. Vacancies, in it.
Well, talking about being on board a ship, when Remick is questioning Geordie, he basically says, most of the time I don't do anything, it's just somebody's got to sit here. Is that what they're doing for like 12 hours a day? Does he just sit mostly doing nothing? Do they just have buttons to press for something to do? Because they're always pressing buttons.
Yeah, I mean, there shouldn't be that much for them to need to do anyway. They're orbiting a planet.
And as we've seen in a couple of episodes, that one person can fly the entire Enterprise.
Yes.
Did anybody else think Riker's reaction to Remick implied he is extremely guilty of something? He has definitely done something worth investigating.
Yes. If I was Remick, I would be focusing heavily on Riker. And right down to the weird way he insists on sitting on his chair. I'd say that when you're going for, an important meeting with someone, when they're investigating at you, you shouldn't be sitting in a chair crotch first.
But is it just meant to be him angry that the Enterprise crew are being treated with any kind of contempt? Or it just does seem like it's written as if he does have something to hide.
Does he get angry about anything to do with Picard when someone seems to be questioning Picard or standing in his way? If they went into a restaurant, if they went into the canteen on the Enterprise and Picard said, well, I will have the soup, and they said, oh, sorry, we've run out of the soup, would Riker then turn around and go, you b*****? But then he does love soup.
It does seem very strange, because they are in Starfleet, there is a chain of command, and if an admiral comes on board and starts giving out orders, and Riker starts acting like that, maybe Starfleet isn't the place for him, because Remick basically says that the crew are overly familiar with each other. So, basically, they are a bad crew. They have a sense of family, which is supposed to be good, but if you're in a military organisation, maybe you should act more like it.
Worf reacts pretty much the same as Riker does. I mean, they just don't like Remick questioning them. They're arrogant about their own kind of self-importance.
I mean, that's not to say that Remick isn't as well. He really takes it to the nth degree. I'm fairly certain that when he's questioning these people, to go straight in with the dead husband card is, a little bit insensitive.
I suppose it's important to highlight that in some ways. It's a good script. That's acting as exposition before Wesley then has to do his psych test, and it's completely seamless.
And on the subject of Wesley's psych test, now, if I had been put in a room and was prepared for the fact that I was about to undergo a test, and I was aware that I was about to face my fear, right down to the fact I'm in room 101, I mean, how more obvious could it be? I would kind of think that if I heard an explosion and then went into a room after the base is suddenly evacuated of people and found two people, one of them being crushed and one of them stuck behind the vent, I kind of think that was the test. Could they have made it more obvious? Maybe a neon sign saying, test this way.
I don't think I would get into Starfleet, because if I heard a bang and I was sitting in the room waiting for the test, I think I would just keep sitting there. I think I'd go, oh, it's not for me to deal with. I'm in a meeting right now. I've got to wait for that to start. So I probably don't have the right kind of thinking.
It's an incredibly elaborate test as well, isn't it? I mean, so elaborate that you would assume that is used for multiple people. But it seems to suggest that that's not the case, because the previous test, he's back in the room. So it must be different. It's strange. I mean, what was the worst fear that Riker had to face? VD?
You have Murdoch leave the room, and it's just a blank, empty room, and he's really, really scared. And what was in that room?
Yes, he clearly dealt with that psychological test very well when he comes out shaking like a leaf.
He's claustrophobic.
Now, what did you think of Murdoch? Obviously, we are seeing this a lot from Wesley's point of view, but Wesley helps him with one test. He gets him out of an angry confrontation with a member of an alien race, and he seems to be worse for wear after his psych test. Did he seem like the best of the best to you? Or is this Starfleet's recruitment policy? Is it just based on diversity? He's the first of his kind. Is it affirmative action?
There is no evidence that he is a good candidate. I would have thought if he's a good candidate, then the Vulcan probably was as well.
Well, any of them?
Well, not the one who didn't do anything in time.
She was pretty, though.
But the centre wasn't being run by Riker.
I mean, Murdoch isn't an unlikable character. He is nice, and the fact that he wins in the end, it's not a bad thing. But you just kind of think somebody else deserved it.
You would have liked to have seen more evidence that he was the right stuff. We are in some ways, although we don't love Wesley, we are backing him, and he does seem to be the most competent, but it seems for reasons unknown or scenes unseen, Murdoch is the better candidate.
I mean, we hear that he's the legendary Murdoch, that he has this big history, and you would think that people who are already kind of established don't need to go through these tests to get into Starfleet.
That's a minor problem with the script, which basically you want to say, show, don't tell. We've been told he's great, but we've not actually seen any evidence of it whatsoever. But you can forgive it because it is a superior episode in every other way.
Yeah, I can't say it bothered me when I was watching it. Maybe I would have liked to have seen him be a little more on the ball during the testing, but apart from that one where he couldn't do it, the first ones he was pretty quick at, so I can sort of live with sort of having been shown. I mean, it falls down on the confrontation that happens, although I find that weird anyway. I mean, if there is an alien race who find courtesy to be an anathema to them, surely they are terrible candidates to put in Starfleet, especially with ships like the Enterprise, who deal largely with diplomacy.
Well, you say that, but Picard's captain, and he's French.
Yes. Point taken.
I think it is lampshaded at the end when Murdoch says, basically, it shouldn't be him. It should be Wesley going through. And I mean, the thing is, Wesley can't go into the academy because he needs to stay on board. He's a main character. So there needs to be somebody else who gets picked. And there needs to be a reason without making Wesley look bad.
Yeah. I mean, although we're never really given an explanation as to why Wesley's score was lower, which I find odd. I perhaps would have liked some sort of explanation. I grant you that you don't get rid of Wesley. That would be weird to do. Although this episode sort of sets it up so that you sort of think, if you don't know what's coming, yeah, I could believe that this would be the point the character leaves. There's been enough episodes, but yeah, I just would have liked some sort of more in-depth explanation as to, you did this, and yes, you thought this was the best thing to do, but actually what you needed to do was this. Whatever it be.
Yeah, that would have been good. And it would have only needed to have been one scene, really, but they've made Murdoch likeable enough. There is quite a nice double act going on between him and Wesley that you're not angry at the end when he actually gets it. You can feel quite pleased for him, even if you don't fully understand, but Starfleet works in mysterious ways. It's a bit like QI, I suppose. You don't know how they give out points, but they definitely do. I have complained in some episodes that there's an A plot and a B plot and they don't tie together. This one we actually get a C plot with Wesley's boyfriend. They share a tender moment at the start of the episode, but obviously Jake is quite upset that he hasn't got into the Starfleet Academy entrance exam, and then decides to steal a shuttle.
It's hard to nitpick with this episode because, as I say, it's the best one there's been. That was a little odd. I mean, it was sort of throwaway at the start, and I almost expected that to be the end of it. And so when he came back again, it very much was, oh, yeah, him. Yeah, all right, okay. Why is he still... Oh, is it because he didn't get it? I guess it's because he didn't get in, but because I hadn't had enough of a setup earlier, it took me a minute to sort of just think, why is he doing... Okay, I guess it must be because of that.
I think it was one, to tie the two storylines together, and also to demonstrate just what a fine captain Picard is and how he stays cool in a crisis. And it performs that task reasonably well. It's a little shoehorned in, but as incidents go in the Enterprise, it's fine. I would like to say that it should be a lot harder to steal a shuttle than a 17-year-old boy being able to break into the bay and do that. Surely there must have been somebody on duty. I mean, if Geordi can sit at a station and do nothing all day, surely there must be a security guard posted on important doors.
Yeah, and it's just waved away with, well, he had knowledge of shuttles.
It does bring up the point about, is it a good idea to have kids on a starship yet again? They keep shooting themselves in the foot with this, really.
Yeah, it's almost as if it's a terrible idea.
Wesley, after his first day of intense testing, goes and hangs out on the empty holodeck, presumably because it's a spare set they had hanging around and they didn't want to shoot it on the bridge. When Worf comes in to give Wesley a nice pep talk, I think it's good that they're actually giving Worf something to do, but you wouldn't think he was the most natural person to give Wesley a pep talk.
Well, I mean, it's the whole thing of dealing with your fear. I guess that's the characters to do it. What I liked with this episode was that they chose the characters they needed to do the parts. So, with your plot aboard the Enterprise, you need Picard and you need Riker, and then everyone else just sort of crops up. For Wesley's plot, Wesley is entirely separate, but you bring in Worf, and that makes sense. They didn't feel a need to shoehorn in Troy or Data or Tasha Yar. They cropped up, but they weren't becoming the focus of the episode, or they didn't have big scenes that just took up time and took away from the main plot itself. That's so much better, and we've had episodes which have done that, and they've been tedious because of it.
It was pretty bad with regards to Tasha when her kind of right-hand man in Worf is getting a big scene and she gets nothing.
You have noticed lately she has been getting increasingly few lines and nothing to do. Even Troy, who has been absent for an inconceivable number of episodes, has had more to do lately than the Chief of Security. Then again, she can't post to someone on the door of the shuttle bay, so she gets what she deserves. So, I suppose we've got to applaud that they seem to be building up to something. There seems to be an ongoing plot line, an arc, if you will. Did you think that was quite exciting? Do you think they will actually resolve it, or will it be one of these things that just gets abandoned with the turnover of writers?
No, I'm assuming that it is building to something, and it's nice. I like having that thing that will play out over time. That's good. Possibly would have liked to have seen it a bit earlier, to be honest with you.
So, a pleasantly surprising and enjoyable episode overall, but we've got plenty more to say about it in Quickfire.
Have we?
No.
Quickfire.
Solutions. Tractor beam? Out of range. Can we beam them aboard? No, out of range. Really? How do you beam people off the planet then?
That is completely ridiculous, and presumably the Enterprise can move. At the end, Picard asks Wesley why he's not in his dress uniform. Why doesn't he answer, "It's 'cause I only own this one jumper, Captain"?
Remick wants to join the ship. I don't think that's ever going to happen.
That's one of the most awkward silences I've seen in a while.
This episode, although it was credited to Sandy Fries, was actually written, or it was heavily rewritten, by Hannah Louise Shearer, and she probably deserves quite a lot of credit for that.
I've been promoted, and I'll be taking over the Academy. Oh, that's brilliant news! Yes, oh, fantastic! I've decided not to take it. Oh, damn.
So that rounds off that episode, the best so far, and you can only imagine the only way is up from here. So next week we'll be looking at Heart of Glory. Looking forward to that one. But from me, it's goodbye.
And from me, goodbye.
From me as well, I would like to wish fondest goodbyes. why aren't you in your dress uniform? Well, I didn't pass the exam, so... No. I mean, why aren't you in the dress? It's very fetching. I especially like the way that it's so short. I can see right the way to Riser, if you catch my meaning.